Loose right dive on it.
This is twice now the Celtics have been first to the floor. They try to save with Horford. Unbelievable.
Boston first to the floor. So good.
Brown fakes, fires up the three. Tatum dives on the floor. Everybody dives. Jaylen Brown with the flash. Blocked by Porzingis. He's doing it all. Tatum spinning, driving, layup. Washington drives. Blocked by White. Oh, what a block from Derek White.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Tonight, a Xavier Tillman deep dive, part 2 of our player deep dive series. And we've got some other fun stuff coming up for you as well. Jake Eisenberger's here. Derek White's mistress. Jake, how are we doing, sir?
I'm here. I'm good. Friday, little Pilates bagel action to start the day, followed by a Xavier Tillman deep dive. You can't really ask for a better start to the day here.
Pilates bagel action. Is that Pilates and bagel at the same time? Is that how does that work?
It's sequential. Pilates followed by bagel, followed by Tillman deep dive. I could potentially try all three at once, but I'm about a man.
Great sequence. Love it. All right. Please hit that like button, folks. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out our friends over at Celtics Lab and the How About Them Celtics podcast. Great shows over there by great people. We're going to get into the Xavier Tillman deep dive in a minute, but first, we've got some news for you.
Okay.
Of course. We've got the new little stinger there for the news. So Nick Wingfield of a publication called The Information basically saying that the Jeff Bezos news, there's no fire to that smoke. It's not really happening. So apparently Bezos and the Fenway Sports Group are both out of potential contention for Celtics ownership. It was relayed, this is again by Nick Wingfield of The Information, it was relayed that there is, quote, zero truth to the Simmons report. On Monday, Bill Simmons said on his podcast that there was legitimate buzz about Jeff Bezos buying the Celtics. Apparently, that's not happening. Jake, this whole situation continues to evolve. What do you think?
Yeah. I personally find it quite hard to believe that Simmons would have been that adamant. Like, he was like, I don't care if I'm aggravated, I'm right. Like, he was very adamant. I wonder if this is like, like the trade deadline or free agency where we get all these reports. We get Jaylen Brown might be traded, Marcus Smart might be traded, and there's no truth to the reports. Like, they get squashed, and then they get to the deadline, and certain deals do happen. I wonder if like it's one of those situations where there's no point in Bezos in like indicating he has any interest from like a negotiating leverage perspective, or maybe that Bill Simmons is just wrong, and there's just no smoke to the fire. I think it's good news if this new report is accurate, and that specifically the Fenway Group being out. I saw some people on Twitter speculating that the reason that they were even linked was because the Fenway Group themselves leaked the information because they want people to not think that they're broke. So that's hopefully true. I have no idea if that's true, obviously. And then the Bezos part of it as well. Like, that just leaves, hopefully, currently, we know there's one group with interest, and it's Pags and the fellas.
Yeah, it's a tough read. Like, we didn't know before the Simmons drop, and we don't really know now. I think the one thing that we have a good feeling about is like Bill Simmons' credibility in this scenario, where like he does operate in those like rich guy circles, and he was so adamant on his pod, like, I know this, aggregate me, I don't give a fuck. I know for a fact that this is at the very least in the works. So, you know, maybe Bezos like wants a counterpoint out there to sort of simmer down the attention around him while he's in this sort of research phase of a, potential acquisition. Again, just speculating, but it would be very strange for Simmons to go out there so adamantly with that take and for there to be no truth to it. So interesting. Moving on in other news, Jaylen Brown. Having a good summer. As he said himself here on his Twitter, we've got some stuff we're about to drop on you for Jaylen Brown. I haven't got the track, but he collabed on a track with A$AP Ferg, a track called Just Do It. Apparently a diss track aimed at Nike. Jake, what do you think?
Oh, is it? So I listened to it just like before we hopped on, and as I was like eating breakfast, so I was like half paying attention, but I expected this to be so bad. Like, NBA players doing raps, most of them are awful. But like, I feel like he stayed within himself. He didn't He didn't stray too far from his strengths. He's essentially just like talking smoothly with music behind it. So like you can only go so wrong with that. And it's like if that just came on, the song's like fine. It's like fine music. It reminded me and brought me back to my ASAP Ferg days. 2014 or 2015 Groove in the Moo music festival in Maitland, New South Wales. I saw ASAP Ferg, and back when the song Put In Work was
Great song. One of my
very
favorites.
popular. And so I was listening to that and I'm like, hell yeah, I'm back on my ASAP Ferg kick. I'm glad it wasn't a disaster, but Jaylen Brown is objectively having like a crazy summer.
Yeah, look, I'm not the right person. I'm not even in the top 1,000 people to evaluate a hip hop song that was made in the last like 20 years. Big like late 90s, early 2000s hip hop fan. If you listen to any of our, or if you watch any of our like underrated plays shows, they're like inundated with like J Dilla tracks and MF Doom tracks. That's more my side of the hip hop spectrum. But look, it wasn't terrible, I think, is the main takeaway. Like you suggested, Jake, where it was just palatable. I think reading other people's like more informed people's takes on like the hip hop side of things, like it's kind of got this mumble, lazy sort of rap.
That's the thing. That's
phrasing.
what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very chill, just like Jaylen is known to be off the court. So sticking with Jaylen Brown's incredible summer, he had this to say to NBC Sports Boston recently.
Last year is over, to be honest. You know, we celebrated. We had a good time. It's been an awesome summer. I've been having a great summer, by the way. But it's over with. Now it's back to work. Now we got the target on our back. Everybody's trying to come after us, and I'm like, come on. So it's back to work. And I'm looking forward to next season.
Do you
Hell
believe
yeah.
him, Jake? Do you believe
Hell
him?
yeah, dude. This is like feeding chum to sharks at the moment in the off season. Like we are just so thirsty for any type of Celtics anything, and for Jaylen to give us this little soundbite about just target on your back, hungry for more. Like this version of Jaylen Brown, I'm very glad that we've got Jaylen Brown at the helm from a leadership perspective. I would say I think it's pretty clear that he's taken that emotional leader role, and for him to be like, come on, we're ready for more. Summer's over, back to the gym. I mean, we've already got the photos of him doing his back to the underwater workouts. He's now upgraded from just weights under the water. He's now doing ball handling drills, I'm guessing, under the water at the same time. He's showering. His Supermax contract must have kicked in because his girlfriend, Kaisa, I'm hoping I got that right. I haven't heard it out loud anywhere yet. Yeah. But she's uploaded a 17 slide thing on Instagram. A lot of designer gifts, a lot of private jets, a lot of Emirates first class, a lot of different countries, a cake with Jaylen Brown's face on it.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, two very in shape individuals having a good summer. The honeymoon phase is undefeated, Ben. Jaylen Brown's having a good time.
Oh yeah, dude, that contract has definitely kicked in. Amazing that it took a $300 million contract to then get the face cake going on. I would have thought that's a pretty achievable thing for anybody at any wage. I'm gonna have to shop around and see if I can get a Ben Vallis face cake going up for my wife. Her birthday's coming up, actually. Jaylen Brown. I'm sure she'd love that. My ugly mug on her birthday cake. Jaylen Brown, you said emotional leader, definitely the vocal leader as well. Sort of a tandem leadership style between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. You love to see it, and you love just the recognition of, we know the challenge that's coming up more so than ever because they've had like target on their back seasons before. But more so than ever, that's going to be the case coming up. So just that Jaylen understands the objective. You can imagine he's cascading that down to the rest of the team, getting them at least sort of emotionally and mentally ready for the upcoming season. I don't wish to acknowledge last year is over. I'm still very much in the championship.
No,
it's
awesome.
Not. I just watched Game 5. Jake and I are in possession of a very high-quality cut of Game 5 of the finals. If this stream gets 200 likes, we may share that with you, but it's like 1080p, 60 frames per second. So good. I watched it yesterday and tears in my eyes, man. Like still that is still very much in the middle of my heart.
So many good moments. Yeah, we got there after a couple of Russian dubbed versions.
Yes.
Which doesn't quite hit the same as the Mike Breen commentary.
Not quite.
But But yeah, it's really good. We got a nice collection coming together of playoff games in 1080p HD. That I'm cutting together a few different things. I posted a Sam Hauser highlight reel from the finals on Twitter if you want to go check that out, and we'll do a Sam Hauser deep dive in short order as well. But yeah, man, it's not over until the Celtics are eliminated. That's how it works. We are the defending champions until we're not. So we've got a long way to go until it's over for us. I like the mentality for the players. Does not apply to fans. That's for damn sure.
Different viewpoint. Absolutely. Well, look, in a second, we're going to get to our Xavier Tillman player deep dive. But first, here's a quick word from our friends over at PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Sign up today and get $50 back when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks has season-long options. Justin Jefferson, 1,300 receiving yards. Sam Darnold at QB. For my sake, I hope he hits more as he's my keeper in my fantasy league where last place has to run a half marathon while drinking 6 beers. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning $10 into $1,000. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Run your game.
Shout out PrizePicks. Shout out to the CLNS Network for presenting the First to the Floor podcast and audio podcast. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app, including Spotify. Get those numbers up for us. The YouTube situation has definitely eclipsed the audio pod in recent weeks. So please give us some love over on your favorite audio platform. 6 beers while running a half marathon, Jake. Have you had the pleasure of doing that in your fantasy career?
Thankfully not. Last season was the first season that we implemented this last place punishment for our fantasy league. The other league is last place. You have to spend 24 hours in McDonald's and you can eat your way out using various items that take time off your punishment. But thankfully, not yet. I was in the semi-final of the bottom bracket in both leagues. So I was staring down the barrel of potentially having to do both of those last place punishments last season. Hopefully, better things ahead. For me, and it's like so much more stressful than it needs to be and also completely changes the game theory because like now first place wins like $200, but it's like pales in comparison to how painful the punishments are. But I'm used to just the incentive of avoiding the shame of losing. This takes it to a whole nother level, which is amazing. Now, Jake, maybe you can kick us off here before we get into like the real deep dive portion of this Tillman evaluation. Thought we could start by like recapping his short tenure as a Celtic. Obviously, we acquired him at the beginning or during the trade deadline for Lamar Stevens and a 2027 second round pick via Atlanta and a Celtics 2030 second round pick via Dallas. And he spent, obviously not too many games with the Celtics prior to the playoffs in their regular season there. Yeah, so I think Tillman, as far as I can tell from like reactions on Twitter and how our Discord feels about him, he's a fan favorite. Like people are very high on Tillman for his play on the court. Seems like a cool guy. But yeah, everybody seems to really like Tillman. And I think he kind of ended up living up to what he was billed as being capable of doing, even if it only happened in very short moments. Like, he played way less than I anticipated after the trade happened. When that trade happened, I thought, see you later, Luke. That's kind of it for you as the third big man on this roster. But it was like not the case at all. In the regular season, he played 18 out of 18 games, 257 minutes. And compared to Cornette, who played over about 100 minutes more than Tillman in the regular season, where I kind of would have expected that to be flip-flopped. Sure. And now in the playoffs, again, Tillman didn't really get a shot until kind of later in the playoffs. He got a nice game against Indy, but obviously he really became valuable in the finals once Porzingis went down, specifically in Game 3, where, this was kind of the moment maybe of Tillman's career, I would say.
Feel the concern of the crowd here at the American Airlines Center. Mavericks led by 13 in the first quarter. Tillman tries a three. It's good! Xavier Tillman from downtown!
Oh my goodness, the Boston Celtic bench went absolutely nuts after that made bucket by Tillman.
What a moment.
Dude, this was, I mean, if you've been following along mine and Jack Simone's of How About Them Celtics podcast as well, feud, I would say, over Xavier Tillman's three-point shooting ability as someone who did not believe in it at all, and Jack being someone like, yeah, he can shoot, and me being like, I just don't understand how you can think that. But this was a moment that was a culmination of all those things, and like was a huge freaking bucket in Game 3 of the NBA Finals to put the Celtics up. Was it 15 or whatever it was, and they were just on this monster run. Incredibly high vibes at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had Jack Simone on the show after that game, and he was
right.
on the floor, and he like turned his camera around to that corner where that three was launched and splashed by Xavier Tillman, and like did a little dance from the corner. It was a goated first of the floor. How about them Celtics crossover moment? But yeah, I mean, sticking with the regular season side of Tillman before we really dive into his playoff numbers, Synergy classifies his points per possession rating as very good. Which is, of course, very good.
That's
particularly in half-court offense, where his points per possession rating is 84th percentile overall. But really small sample size, and this obviously cascades down to the playoffs as well. Like, he hasn't been a Celtic that long. Generally, we're working with a small sample size, so we will probably reach back into his Memphis tenure to some degree. But just 3 field goal attempts per game in the regular season. Nothing really jumps off the page except for maybe his super low turnover rate, 0.3 turnovers per game. But again, like so few touches, it's hard to really read into that. But, you know, he does have that high basketball IQ. So I think you can take something from that. At +8 net rating. Defensively in the regular season, ranks very low per Synergy, 27th percentile in terms of his points per possession rating and efficiency.
Interesting.
What was there a knee injury aspect there? Remember, if you think back to regular season before we got into the playoffs, he wasn't being played as much as we kind of hoped as Celtics fans, or thought that he would once he was acquired there. He did miss some time due to a knee injury. So I don't know, Jake, like we're speculating here, but that probably came into play, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was injured when we traded for him. And I remember being like, don't like trading for players that are currently injured. That's not super fun. But yeah, and he looked a little slow at times. Like he came back, looked good, and then came back after that a couple of games off and didn't look awesome. But then he looked incredible in the playoffs. I mean, defensively, we've got some of the highlights here from the finals. Like in Game 3, man, he was staying in front of Kyrie. He had Luka in trouble as well on a couple of possessions here. Yeah, Luka forces him left, gets a block. Daniel Gafford puts him in a headlock, gets a foul drawn on Gafford going back the other way. And then again, just incredible lateral ability to stay with Luka and forces a really tough miss. Yeah, Jaden Hardy, I don't know what he think. Jaden Hardy experience in the finals was just not something that was successful against the Celtics. But yeah, man, he turned up in that game in a way that I thought we all thought was possible when we traded for him, but we really didn't get to see him utilized in a switch everything context at all in the regular season. Maybe a little bit here and there, but like nothing to the degree that the Celtics were implementing switch everything with Horford out there. And to see him come in, and this is why everybody is so enamored with Tillman, I think, is because we're desperate to find the successor to Al Horford, and he's literally shades of Al Horford. Like the amount of times that I have been confused by Tillman and or Al Horford being on the court is every time. Every time Tillman's playing a game, I'm confused and make the mistake. So like he literally looks like Al Horford. He obviously has the switchability. And does he also have the dagger, the clutch gene? Because obviously he hits that monster 3 in Game 3 of the finals. A la Al Horford, how many monster shots does he hit? And then that Sacramento Kings game where Joe Mazzulla benched all the starters when they were up like 15, 20 points, and the Kings desperately needed the win in order to move up the standings. And we had the Bus One boys. We had a Tillman, Cater, double bigs lineup out there, and Tillman ends up hitting a game winner floater to seal it. So does he have the Al Horford clutch gene? He can switch. Apparently he can shoot. I'm still not so sure, but I think that's why everybody's like very enamored with what he could become.
Yeah. He's only 25 as well. And as we've said on the show, like, he looks a fair shade older than 25. And so I guess I only say that not to diss the guy, but like just that it's easy to forget how young he is and how early into his career he is and how much potential there is for him to grow and exceed the value of his contract. Like, I think he's like a 34% from the corner 3-point shot away from like massively exceeding the value of his contract. And that's not that out of the question. I do have, speaking of questions, a question for you, Jake. Is Xavier Tillman facing, of all like bench Celtics, or really of all Celtics going into next season, is he facing the largest role increase of any Celtic compared to last year?
I would assume so, but I do think they're going to platoon Cornet. I think Joe really trusts Luke, and for a good reason. Luke was really good in the regular season. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into the knee thing, but he has like that. That's part of why Tillman dropped in the draft, and he's had a couple of injuries throughout his career. Obviously, as we said, when he was traded, I wouldn't want to overdo it with him either. Like, we want him for the playoffs, and because like that in the regular season, you can play drop defense with Luke Cornet for 15 plus minutes, and with the talent on this team, you're going to be fine. Luke's proven that. And so, yes, I think obviously he's going to see a big role increase because his role was so small last season, and KP is going to be out till Christmas. But I do think maybe he's not going to play as big of a role as maybe some people think. We've got a question from RJ in the chat right now. 3 years from now, who would you rather have, Tillman or Watson? I love Anton Watson. Anton, what's his name, as I coined him on draft night. I mean, Tillman has literally proven he can play in the NBA Finals already, and going back to playoffs before, we're still not sure if Anton Watson is an NBA player. So I love it, but that's an easy one.
Like, it's a little early to ask the question, like especially in terms of like if you could take what each of them are right now. It's obviously Tillman, but if you had to choose based on potential, maybe that's when you swing Watson. But then we're getting into crazy speculative territory. But then again, that is one of the backbones of this show. So
That's right.
It's a great question, RJ. Thank you for tickling the mind with that one. Jake, do you want to get us into the meat of this segment? Like, talk to us about what Player Deep Dives is all about, and we'll start to run through some of those strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. Deep dive, we'll just, have a look at the numbers, have a look at some of the highlights, talk about some of the moments. And this is like going back to him being, maybe more of a 16-game player than a 82-game player. So looking at his playoff net ratings, going back to this playoffs, obviously anything from this playoffs, incredibly small sample size here, right? Tillman on the court, a 20.00 net rating. Tillman off the court, 7.64, both elite numbers. Again, he happened to be on the court in the third quarter barrage against the Dallas Mavericks, which really helped him. And again, in Game 5, he was on the court and helped spell Horford. But that matters. And so the fact that he can be on the court and do that, even in a small sample size. But I think what's more interesting, looking at the playoffs, 2022-2023, when he was playing in the playoffs for Memphis, you remember they played the Lakers in the first round. Yeah. And there was 183 minutes with Tillman on the court, and I want to say 110 minutes with him off the court. Tillman on the court, they had a 0.38 net rating. Tillman off the court, negative 18.75. So
wow.
Massive swing. And he was awesome in that playoff series. Like, he gave Anthony Davis everything. He had a 22-point, 13 rebound game. So he's shown in the playoffs in particular, he can be a real problem. And I wonder if there's just something to that switchability, or also part of it as well. In Memphis, he was always playing behind Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson. Obviously, he did get up, a fair chunk of minutes, 17, 1,800 minutes in his first 2 seasons. Yeah, he's 25, but he's only played 4 seasons. So like, as far as NBA goes, hasn't had a ton of reps, not that many seasons in the NBA. But yeah, so like that from just a pure, can you impact in the playoffs is something he's proven now. Small sample this year, but bigger sample on a worse team in a tough matchup in the year before.
Yeah, well, even then in Memphis, I think it's fair to say he was playing without a defined role. Like probably the defined role going in was you're the third string big man behind Triple J and Adams. Sorry, I was drawing a total mental blank.
Well, he hasn't been on the court in a while.
Well, exactly, yeah. And that's the thing is like they were so injured there in Memphis that his role was always fluctuating as far as like their utilization of Tillman there in Memphis. So while he showed really good flashes in times when he played, and that net on-off rating like really illustrates that, like I think it's probably fair to say he didn't always have a clear idea of what his role was there. I think Memphis probably had the same understanding or lack thereof for Tillman's utilization on that team. And again, speculating, but you would hope that going forward and as he matures as a person and as a player, and we can start to add definition around what his role looks like, especially before KP comes back around Christmas, that maybe we can expect a little more or at least a little more consistency out of Tillman. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the awesome thing about having the championship. Like, experimenting feels so much more chill now. It's like, yeah, can we see what Tillman can do in the handoff game? Can we run some pick and rolls? Can we throw it to him on the block? Moz in the chat here think, does he have some ISO juice on the block? Yeah, I've seen him have a couple of nice moves down low. And I think this goes for, we're going to do more deep dives on Hauser in particular. I'm looking forward to as a candidate for like, what can we kind of see these guys do if we give them the opportunity to? Well, similar with Pritchard, we talked about that. Like, can he play 27, 28 minutes? Hauser, a little bit of playmaking, which we'll get into. But yeah, what can Tillman do? Let's see, because it's not so scary to experiment if things go badly when you have the title in your back pocket.
Yeah, so offensive strengths for Tillman, small sample size, like especially looking at the playoffs this year for Xavier Tillman, but he definitely maintained his offensive efficiency from the regular season. Cutting off ball is definitely a strength, especially like shallow cuts from, like he'll sit in the dunker spot and then sort of fade out to add the illusion of spacing, because offensively, like he doesn't have a perimeter shot, so that's kind of how he has to sort of semi-contribute to spacing. So he'll fade out and then like shallow cut back in from that deeper dunker spot. And we generated like pretty good looks from Tillman or on offensive possessions rather, with Tillman cutting off ball. 1 point per possession per synergy, which is like really good. It's like top like 85th percentile. Similarly with Tillman as the roll man, again, really small sample size, but a high efficiency look for the Celtics. I don't have the data beyond the play efficiency, but from memory, he was pretty effective out of the short roll with his decision making and passing and offloading the ball from that position, but just 60% at shots around the rim. So finishing definitely needs some work. I mentioned the small sample size. It was much more efficient during the regular season as a Celtic. Again, small sample size, was like 16 games or whatever, but 73% at the rim. So he definitely has that capability. But for the most part, if you were going to sort of like assess the elevator pitch for his offensive strengths, he's a utility guy. His best work is done off the ball. I mentioned the cutting. He's also a great screen setter. He's got that high basketball IQ. He'll find something to do on the court generally, even if he doesn't have an assignment within that play call. So I think that really makes up for the lack of spacing that he provides. Like he'll go set a screen or he'll cut like a way to pull a defender away from the action. Like he knows ball beyond his sort of limited skill set. So I think that makes him a really effective player.
Yeah. So I'm going to mention Luke Cornett here. So at the same time, so like you don't have to be a shooter to be a spacer in the NBA, and you touch on it perfectly. Like he's really good at like finding space in the dunker spot and on the short roll, and he's a good passer. Like similar to Luke Cornett, something that Luke got really good at this year was like finding Luke on like out of the perimeter, and Luke's not even looking at the rim, and he's just looking for the next passer. Can you just keep the offense moving? Because yes, Xavier Tillman's offensive numbers weren't awesome in Memphis at times, but they also had like a really bad offense a lot of the time as well, especially in the half court. So I'm really interested to see what Tillman looks like in this offense when you're surrounded by Jaylen, Jason, Derek, and Drew. We're probably going to see that lineup, right? Like Horford's not playing on back-to-backs. Probably going to see it regardless. So surrounded by the Houses and the Pritchards with that type of spacing, like I really like he as you said, he does stuff. Are you setting screens? You're not just getting lost in no man's land. Are you active? And so, and he fights on the offensive rebounds. Like he's not, going to give you a ton there, which
no, he doesn't.
We'll talk about. But so last 2 seasons combined, regular season and Memphis and Boston, 66.6% at the rim. That's totally fine. Like that's like you want it to be higher for a big man, but he's like not that tall. But like you can kind of live with that number. And then in the floater range, that's what's quite interesting. Last 2 seasons, 47%, which is like really nice in the 2-point range. Like you find him on the short roll. Can you give him those little floaters? Like that blows Tatum, that blows Pritchard out of the water as far as like floater range goes. Like those guys are like 37, 38% in the floater range. So 47% in the floater range is actually pretty solid. So I like that for him. And then can you make decisions out of the short roll? And he can. He's a really smart passer.
Anecdotally, though, like, does he have good touch around the rim? Like, I know the numbers sort of suggest that he has at times, and particularly in Memphis and again, the regular season for the Celtics. But and this is kind of going back to like false memories and anxiety as a Celtics fan watching the games and more the frustration, I think, is what sticks more in the mind. But like, is he good around the rim or is that an area for improvement?
It's definitely an area for improvement. No question. Sure. But Ben, I mean, anecdotally, the man was 5 for 8 from the field in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So,
factually.
So that's a pretty good. If he can just maintain that level of efficiency for the rest, 100% from 3,
that'd be great
as well. So yeah, I don't think he's an elite offensive player by any means. Like that's, but we're not comparing him to Horford of old. Like, I don't have Horford's rim numbers in front of me either, but if I was to venture a guess, like, is Horford probably around 66% at the rim at the moment as well? Probably. That'll be my guess. He's somewhere around there. Sure. Obviously, the difference is Horford has become like an elite big man shooter, and that's like insanely valuable. But yeah, not Al Horford.
Sure, yeah. Maybe we can use that to transition to the offensive weaknesses before we get to the defensive stuff. So, and a lot of this, at least from my perspective, Jake, is going to contradict some of the strengths. Like, I think he's really walking the line there between strength and weaknesses offensively. Like, where his strengths shine is defensively, which we'll get to later. But I just have, like, generally his weaknesses scoring. Like, we know he's not much of a shooter. He doesn't really have a bag, quote unquote. Like, not that we need him to, but like offensively, like he doesn't necessarily have a go-to move, I would say.
Does he not? I don't know. Moz seems to think that he might. I don't know.
Well,
like,
I'd love to see the facts and figures around that. Again, this is like feels like or doesn't feel like, and I think that might be sort of speaking to that. But the real contradictive point compared to what we just talked about is like his biggest weakness is that he detracts from our spacing. And yes, there are other ways to contribute to spacing as a non-shooter, but like we spoke about Peyton Pritchard in our last player deep dive, that if nothing else, he's always going to contribute to the brand of Celtics basketball, of Missoula ball. And no matter how much you can praise Tillman's other ways to contribute to spacing, like he just can't contribute in like the real way that the best version of the Celtics offensive machine needs, which is like spacing, hit the corner, keep your defender tight with you to open up potential drive, and then subsequently kick opportunities for our offense. Like that's where our scoring is bread and buttered, and Tillman just like he cannot contribute in that sense. So as far as like in the context of being a current Celtic, that's I think where his biggest offensive weakness is.
So yes, obviously the shooting is important for any team. Being able to stretch the floor with spacing is so important. But like it was not that long ago when the Boston Celtics had Robert Williams in the starting lineup, and
it was not that long ago that we had no championships in the Jays era.
Totally, I understand that, but like at the same time, like their offense was still really, really good. And not only is the team changed a lot, but Jaylen and Jason in particular have made massive strides. Derek White and Drew Holiday have made massive strides. At some point, we're going to have to reckon with the idea that like we're probably not going to have 5 elite shooters on the court at all times, and I think that's okay. Like you look at the offense in 21-22, the Celtics were 9th on the season, but you look at like the second half of the year when they actually took off, they were like top 3, top 4. So like they do have the ability. You go back to the bubble. Daniel Tice was our starting center with Enes Kanter for majority of the year. Again, another top 10 offense. Like, and this is all with like lesser versions of Jaylen, Jason, Derek, Drew. So like, yes, I'm arguing for Tillman here. I'm not necessarily saying that offense is a strength for him. Like when you compare him to like, I mean, Porzingis, forget about it. Horford, forget about it still. Like when you're talking about guys that are like very willing shooters, not just capable, but like guys that are willing to get out. Like Horford had multiple games in this playoffs with 10 plus attempts and knocked him down at a high clip at the same time. So like, you just like, and then just side note, do we ever need a Al Horford successor? I'm not sure we actually do because he's going to be here forever and that's fine. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excusable weakness. It's a manageable weakness, but we are assessing for weaknesses, and to me, that's I think the standout thing. What have you got for genuine offensive weaknesses for Tillman?
Well, yeah, I think putting orange ball in basket is the one. It's kind of
essential.
But as a big man, not as essential as like look at Rudy Gobert. Very good player, right? He is so bad at putting the orange ball in the basket on anything outside of a lob. Like there's plenty of examples of very impactful big men. Hartenstein's pretty capable. So this might be a good example. Hartenstein, not the same offensive rebounder as Tillman, but good passer, very good in the floater range, like kind of insane in the floater range in the playoffs. I'm not sure if Tillman's going to be able to get to that level, but like, can you just be like really solid screen setter, hit the short roll, and keep the offense moving? That's kind of a strength for big men in the NBA. A lot of guys can't do that. Mitchell Robinson for the Knicks now, not a guy that can do that. Like even like Brook Lopez, he pops most of the time, but like, I know he's pretty good on the shot roll, but There's plenty of examples of guys that are like very capable decision makers not decision makers in the hands and can be impactful offensively. So I'm kind of just talking myself in circles here because I don't want to say that offense is a weakness, but it's like if the offense can still be elite with him on the court, then I'm like willing to say that it's like a neutral skill.
Yeah, I mean, we keep harping on about lack of sample size, and it's like we really need to see like another 100 possessions of Tillman and our big four essentially to understand like how those limitations, rather than weaknesses, maybe we can call them limitations offensively, like come into play, and how impactful are they over a large stretch of time, multiple possessions, multiple games, multiple months throughout a regular season. How does that come into play? When we come back in a moment, we're going to talk about Xavier Tillman's defense, but first here's a quick word from our friends over at Game Time.
It's finally football season. The West Virginia Mountaineers kick off the season against number 8 Penn State in Morgantown. I'll be using Game Time to easily find incredible deals on great tickets in Milan Puskar Stadium to catch the Mounties hopefully upset the Nittany Lions. When you jump on Game Time, it's got the stadium right in front of you. It's really easy to find awesome seats. You can get amazing deals like the aptly named Super Deal, which can save money and get you a great spot in the stadium. It's also got concert tickets and tickets to a bunch of other shows, so definitely check that out. Personally, I love the all-in pricing, which you toggle on and Game Time shows you the full price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or sports tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
The big teabag defense. Jake, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, man. This is his calling card, obviously. And especially when it comes to switching. Like, this is so powerful when it comes to the playoffs. It's so powerful at any point when you're playing defense, but especially when you get to the playoffs and you're just like scrapping to save every single bucket. And like the Celtics game plan in the playoffs was, Luka, we don't really care who you get on you. We're not going to send a ton of help and you're going to have to beat our men. And it's like, okay, is it Hauser? Is it Pritchard? Is it Tillman? Can you make them work? And Tillman did a lot more than like make them work. Like in game 3, he was a legitimate stopper in that game. And so there's so much film of Tillman switching onto guys. When he moved over from Memphis, I put together a video of him switching onto just like every position possible. He's had success against Jokic. He's also had games against Jokic where Jokic has not missed a single shot, but that's just the Jokic effect. But yeah, man, that's like his main thing is his switchability. And we've seen it going back to the 2022 season where we had that historic defense and Horford was at like, I mean, it's crazy that he was like pretty much the best switch big in the NBA at that age and still is. But like for Tillman to be able to come in and do that and shut guys down, like it just gives your defense a super high floor and a super high ceiling.
Yeah, I have this thought that like Cornet and Tillman are a really solid 5-man split into 2 players, and the Tillman half is the playoff like format of defense, which is like, can you switch everything and can you like limit team-wise the amount of weaknesses that your opposition has to exploit. And in the playoffs, we saw this in the finals, particularly Game 3, Tillman's ability, like you said, to switch, guard the ball handler, per synergy, 81st percentile points per possession ranking, guarding the ball handler in pick and roll actions, which is completely insane for a big man. You saw it in the footage that we were running earlier, him switching on to Luka, Kyrie, to elite offensive players in the half court and really holding up and limiting them in terms of their own efficiency. Synergy also classifies his points per possession rating as excellent overall. Defensively, 87th percentile. The average opponent effective field goal percentage with Tillman on the floor was 39%, which is insanely low. Why is this? Again, it goes back to that switchability, his versatility as a big man defender, which I think that quality alone makes him exceed the value of his contract, because that's just such an invaluable trait, such an invaluable asset in the playoffs that you can just always go to. And if during this offseason, if you can work on some of those offensive limitations that we talked about, it's just Brad Stevens like absolutely cooking again, Jake, just with this acquisition. Moneyball shit from Brad. Like,
think about Lively and how much he struggled in switches on Tatum in the playoffs. Now, is that a Tatum thing or is that a Lively thing? Like, can Tillman stay in front of Tatum consistently? I think he can do a better job than Lively did on Tatum. Like, Tatum was just blown by that guy possession after possession after possession. There are just so few centers that play in the playoffs that you feel comfortable switching everything. Like, the Mavs switched everything, but it's like you're switching Kyrie, Luka, and Lively onto really good players. Having someone like Tillman, it's like you see people on Twitter will be like, "Oh, Tatum was hunted by Luka in the playoffs," or Donovan Mitchell was hunting Horford to death in the second round. It's like when you have a switch everything defense, they have to hunt someone. They have to hunt someone. It's like Derek White was the guy against Jimmy Butler in the year before. It's like, just because they're hunting this specific person does not mean that specific person is a good option to be attacking one-on-one. Sure. Contextually compared to the NBA. It might be on this team because this team has insane defensive personnel. But so if Tillman is going to be your quote-unquote weak link similar to Al Horford is, like, that's so huge for the playoffs. And it goes back to what I was saying about 16-game player. It's like the playoffs always slow down into who can like drag buckets out of the mud. And if you can just like push their face a little deeper into the mud, And that's all we can ask for from a guy like Tilbag.
Big Tildo. So it sounds like his biggest defensive strength is that he has no defensive weaknesses. That said, Jake, if you had to list some defensive weaknesses, what do you have there?
It's probably defensive rebounding purely because of height, rim protection. But again, if you're switching everything, your rim protection is like keeping guys in front and letting guys behind you kind of help and stuff like that. But drop coverage, again, like good defense in Memphis, but I can't. I have two watching basketball brains. I have watching the Celtics brain where I'm like really locked in on everyone's like skills and weaknesses, and then like watching other basketball, especially Western Conference Memphis Grizzly basketball, pre-Marcus Smart. I'm just like, wow, John Morant can jump high, and these guys play good defense. I'm not locked in on Xavier Tillman's rim defense in a way that I am when I watch like Luke Cornett. Sure. And that's a personal flaw of mine, but yeah, so like I don't feel like I have a good answer on Tillman's ability to protect the rim in drop coverage because I just don't feel like I saw much of it.
Yeah, I don't think he plays drop coverage very often. I don't think that Joe and the coaching staff know to not put him in that position, and that's just not where a defense with Tillman as the 5-man is best operating at. He's much better switching, as we've said. I would say, just continuing on with the weaknesses, like he's a little undersized. We talked about this with Peyton Pritchard's limitations last week as well. And this to me is where him playing big minutes potentially as a starter in that sort of pre-KP Al resting on a back-to-back portion of the season could be problematic in certain matchups, because while he does have that awesome versatility, which is great 90% of the time, we do have a sort of increasing influx of like better, more dominant centers. I think like the whole like dominant center thing went away after the 90s for a really long time, and for a while it was like a really guard driven league, and I think it is still mostly guard and wing driven, but we do have like the Embiids and the Jokic's, and now we've got Wemby and a sort of a growing number of guys I think more so than 5-10 years ago. Yes, sure. Absolutely. At least guys that like pose such a problem where I would imagine the first like chapter or line or whatever of the scouting report, I'm proving here that I've never actually looked at a scouting report, would be like, what are we going to do about this guy?
This
motherfucker.
Chapter 1.
Yeah, chapter 1. Scouting report. What are we going to do about Wemby? Yeah. And like Tillman just does not bode well in that situation. And, I think we're fortunate that we're having to like sort of dive this deeply to uncover defensive weaknesses. But this is a situation where like Tillman probably has to sit, I think, coming up against dominant big men.
But who's a better option against Jokic and Embiid than like someone like Tillman? Like they don't exist.
Probably Cornette.
No, I don't know. So I disagree. I don't think so.
Right.
I think you want the sturdiness, similar to how like Missoula put Drew on Embiid in a regular season matchup. You want someone that can like just bang. I think Tillman, again, because you're just playing straight up, not kind of in that drop in those specific matchups. And again, I think it's two guys. It's Embiid and Jokic. I know Wemby, but like he's not posting up Tillman. Like he weighs like as much as Tillman's left quadricep, I'm pretty sure. And so yeah, I mean like the answer to as well as like neither is the answer to like guarding Embiid and Jokic. Jokic in particular, you put Tillman on Embiid, I couldn't be more comfortable. Tillman on Embiid, you bang. As soon as Embiid dribbles the ball, we're getting hands in passing lanes. We're getting hands at the ball. Can you just be a guy that can like take those bumps? Look at Al Horford. He might be the best Embiid defender still in the NBA, and Tilly's just like the 2 inches shorter version.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a psychological element to the Horford historical defensive dominance of Embiid, and I think that's well and truly in Embiid's head. But, I mean, we're looking for weaknesses, and we can't say that he doesn't have any weaknesses. Obviously, the rebounding, and even on that front, like he still has to get the board after completing a successful defensive possession against a larger big man. So,
defensive rebounding, yeah. Again, though, I don't feel like I know the answer because rebounding was not a problem for this team with Tillman on the court. That's partly because of the existence of Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, and Derek White, and Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard. Everybody on this team rebounds well for their position. And so like when you combine all those things, going back to what I was saying last episode about like the margins, like everyone's like battling on the margins. I do think like numbers wise, the defensive rebounding like percentage is not awesome. I didn't write it down. I thought that I did, but he was 99th percentile on defensive EPM, top 15 defensive EPM when he came over from Memphis. DPM, I think 99th percentile. Like there are statistics out there that indicate that he doesn't really have many weaknesses defensively, as far as how you impact the defense overall.
Which is great.
Which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think
this is why people are excited, though. This is why people are excited, because we know what success looks like in the playoffs defensively, and he ticks a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, such a reliable defensive skill set. There's a reason we had a lot more content for the offensive weaknesses.
Just to address this in the chat, Jake's killing it in this podcast, no offense. Ben does a good job of playing devil's advocate when we don't need, when no one's looking to do it, because it's an important thing from just a conversation thing. It's like, it's nice to try. Like, what was the thing that happened recently? Oh yeah, it was the Tatum Steve Kerr thing, where you're like, maybe there's a coaching basketball thing for it. And like,
yeah, you have to offer a different perspective. Otherwise, it's a circle jerk for an hour, which is no fun. But I will say to go to Zilla's point, like Jake often kills it on every podcast and all Twitter interactions as well. So there's a reason why Jake's killing it in this format as well. But I mean, it would be very Celtics fan of us to run through like a player deep dive, quote unquote, and be like, he's got all these strengths offensively and defensively and no weaknesses. Like, we have to try our best to call out what his limitations are. So just trying to offer up some points there, which I think is fair enough.
That is a good point. I guess as well, though, it's like the context of expectations. So he's on a minimum contract.
Yes.
And we've already seen that he can play in the finals.
Sure.
Like, I don't... There's that kind of... There is no weaknesses for a minimum type style guy if he's playing in the freaking finals and helping you win a championship. But I understand what you're saying. I do think defensive rebounding could be a problem. And we covered the offense. I think we got there a little bit on the weaknesses offensively, but defensively, I'm super high on him. And then maybe health-wise, I'm like not super confident in his overall health.
Yeah, I think that's fair, given I feel like we have a pretty good understanding as outsiders the sort of health status and health riskiness of most players on the roster. And Tillman, it probably just comes down to his shorter tenure as a C, that we don't really have our finger on the button there as far as what to expect health wise from him. I do want to address the comment from Godezilla that I'm selling Tillman short. I love Xavier Tillman. I have been a huge advocate and promoter of Xavier Tillman since he was acquired, including his potential to get red hot from deep, which I think I've talked about from the beginning of the show that he's already exceeding the value of his contract. You mentioned it, Jake, the fact that he can play, meaningful possessions in the finals, I think is the biggest illustrator of that. But, just check out this reaction from myself and the guys on our playback stream as Xavier Tillman just absolutely nailed this three from deep in the...
Feel the concern of the crowd here.
Wrong video, sorry.
Pull it. Oh, here it is.
The corner!
Buries it.
Come on!
The Tillman game.
No way.
Unreal.
That was like one of the best days of my life. I fucking love that game. That was so good. So
it is funny. Like,
for the record, I love Xavier Tillman. Sorry, go ahead, Jake.
No, because I've been the one that's been the turd in the punch bowl. Like everyone's saying, yeah, Tillman, the form looks good. He's going to be a shooter. And I still, to this day, I'm like, I don't really see how everyone's making this mental jump. I know Aaron Baines did it, so like it's obviously possible. Again, you saw how happy I was. No one's going to be happier than me if Xavier Tillman turns into Al Horford three-point shooting. Like, if that's what happens, he'll probably end up having to leave the Celtics, unfortunately, if that's what happens, because someone's going to pay him like $20 million if he can switch everything and also shoot the three ball, because he's literally the perfect playoff player at that point. But hopefully he learns to shoot this offseason, and then we win 2 more titles, and then he leaves, because that's a universe that I can certainly live in.
Yeah, I just wanted to check his contract situation before we go here as I filibuster.
2 years
while
guaranteed,
my
baby.
Spot track page reloads. Yeah, 2 years guaranteed. Okay, so
Yeah.
learn the 3-ball quickly and
Yeah.
then dominate in your 2 guaranteed years before we could no longer afford you. Xavier
And then
Tillman.
forget when the Lakers pay you $20 million. That would be my preferred
right.
outcome. You get paid, you win 3 titles, and then you submarine the Lakers. That would be, again, the universe that I would like to live in. But yeah, Moz Neff in the chat, like talking about, expectations versus like weaknesses and stuff. Like we kind of touched on the rim protection. I think it's fair to be low on the rim protection.
Sure.
I just want to see it in the context of this team before I have a really strong take either way. It does make sense that he's going to struggle with it just by not being that tall. But when you've got guys around him that are forcing guys into tough shots at the rim, his rim protection job becomes easier. But yeah, this really comes back to that 2-year minimum contract. Like he's going to just massively exceed the value of the 2.5 years that he's been here, most likely.
Dude, I'm loving doing these deep dives because I've fully transitioned into like everything. All the content has dried up. I miss the Celtics so much. And there's a reason that Xavier Tillman was like number 2 cab off the rank for this deep dive segment of ours, because it's going to be so interesting to see over a larger sample size how his success with the team bears out. So shout out to everyone in the chat for keeping us maybe more objective than we otherwise would have been. Love to have you guys along the ride here as we do this live. Also, let us know in the comments who you want us to cover for our next player deep dive. We're just going to keep these rolling throughout the offseason. I feel like Jaylen Brown, despite, we know so much about him already, like has he peaked though? For example, he's gotten better every single year. Is he going to get better again? And we've seen that, similar to the summer of George in Seinfeld, relevant reference, that it's currently the summer of Jaylen Brown, according to his tweets there. So I don't know. Have you got someone on your mind there for the next play deep dive?
Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. Like, do we go our favorites, use the people to help us decide? Do we build anticipation? Like, do we save our like the Jaylens and the Jasons for the end of the series because they're the icing on the cake? Or I don't know. There's a few different directions to go, but yeah, I'm like very excited for the Hauser one. That's like probably one that I'm like particularly excited for, because I think that he's shown a lot of flashes of stuff that he can improve. Again, check out the highlight reel in 1080p that I put on Twitter of just like Hauser being incredible, dude. He's like, the last highlight is like him being run off the line on the 3-point line, pump fake, like one dribble, one leg fader towards the rim, and knocks it down like Melo. As Ben coined him earlier in the season, and he's only looked more and more like Melo as time has gone along.
Yep, absolutely. Love to see it. All right, well, folks, let us know in the comments who you want us to cover next week on our player deep dive. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back early next week. Love your work, Jake. Until next time, go Celts.